Those of you who wish to do that, I will not be offended. The Imaginal Realm. I have a lot of problems talking about a lot of this stuff for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is this is my first time ever using PowerPoint in 40 years of teaching. And I did it last week at Midlothian, and I looked back and I was thinking about what was going on, and I looked back and it was sort of like eating off the buffet that you had cooked 2 days ago. So whatever comes out will come out, and I redid it, and we'll just have to see what happens with it. The Imaginal Realm is valuable to me for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that in 1996, I left Bruton Parish with the intention of never coming back to religion again. Some of you who recall that time will remember that there was a horrendous lawsuit around a molestation activity that was not really handled well. And as the energy of the parish focused on the lawsuit, the parochial work itself tended to fall more and more into my lap. And when Charles Vachet came in as interim rector, I went to him in August of that year, and I said, I can't continue doing this. I got to get out. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, well, how long do you want to stay? And I said, well, long enough to help you kind of get adjusted to what's going on. I'll quit at the end of '96, which I did. And I just went running from the place. I backed up my pickup truck to my office, threw all my books in there, took all or most of them to the retreat house in Richmond. Ben Campbell, my friend, runs Richmond Hill. Packed up all my vestments in one big box, and they went to Honduras. I went home. I had absolutely no intention of ever coming back to this. And I was there a long time. The first 4 or 5 months I was restless and irritable, as I always am anyway. But even more so because I had felt as though I had sort of been kicked under the bus, even though none of it was my fault. I went out so tired and so weakened. And I realized that something that Ed Browning, the presiding bishop of years ago, once told me. He says, in the church you got to look out for yourself because ain't nobody going to look out for you. And he was right. This is the God business, and that's why I call it restocking the retail shelves every week. There's something that we expect to do and that people in churches expect to be done that looks like church. And we've been doing it a long time. But after 15 years of not doing it that way, Michael Spear Jones called and asked if I would go to St. George's as their interim. He told me, it'll only be for a couple of months. Yeah, 15 months later, I left. But I wasn't ready to go back, and I wasn't sure because at that point I had pretty much gotten rid of the church and the anger that attended it. A lot of us, I know in this room, grew up in some pretty rough traditions. A lot of darkness. I grew up French Jansenist. There wasn't much fun going on there. I mean, that's that same period of time that brought you all those fun seekers like John Calvin and Martin Luther. It was not a party. It was strict and it was difficult. And it was a worldview that was in my body and remains there. The world of our religious life remains with us until such time as we can move it out through love and forgiveness. Otherwise, it's going to be there and it's going to bite at you every time you turn. And because so much of it is dark, it holds onto us in our bodies in a way that always leaves us ambivalent. We don't quite know what to do. Most of it hurts because it's built on a system that demands a great deal of control exerted by something called doctrine or tradition or whatever it is that's out there that has formed the way that we come together to believe and to practice our religion. It's a way of being that is not easy to get rid of. But at the same time, there are enormous numbers of people who look at us now, and all they do is wonder, what in the hell are we doing? It's a lot of questions. My children do not go to church, and I don't blame them. And I don't think it's any fault of mine. They come into a generation in which church and culture look so much alike that they can't tell the difference between them. The Presbyterian Church in the United States did a survey in 1986, repeating a survey that had been done 20 years before. They came up with the same notion. They went to a block of people in 66, asked the questions, are you in church? Why aren't you in church? They came back in 86 with the same questions, why aren't you in church? And they said, what's the difference? It all looks like the same thing. In other words, what is here is a mirror of culture. And culture is a mirror of the mind and the body. And so, things that we talked about years ago in terms of salvation and whatever it is that is gospel for you and me doesn't necessarily convey to a lot of people. And in that process, we are taken up into the business model that we saw before. The gentleman and he's on target. He's absolutely on target. But there's one piece of the brain that he left out. The limbic structure also has attached to it something called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the place of the spirit. We've never been there, folks. And if we don't get there, this whole thing is circling the drain. Can you imagine walking in and talking about Jesus when a group of you are confined to a dark room in pews on a Saturday afternoon when you'd rather be home? Does that make sense? Think about it. This is uncomfortable. This is awful. And so every time I come into a church building and address a group like this, or even on Sunday, I have to reconstruct this with a different way of allowing faith to come forth out of a world of belief. Belief is what the brain does. It makes lists and it figures things out and it says, yes, this is right, this is wrong. There's something else that's a deeper calling that we have ignored. And that is the calling of the heart. And that's what I'm going to spend some time on. This is like 2 hours worth of material squoze into 20 minutes. All right, showtime. Push the button. Oh, by the way, after I stayed home for 5 months and I went to Busch Gardens, auditioned, and I became a professional musician, and that's what I still do. So, okay. Heart-brain connection. Beginning of our life. The very, very, very beginning in our mother's bodies. We are a group of cells who come together and form the most primitive organ that we are, and that is our heart. It's just a mass of cellular activity. And after a period of time, it begins to move and beat. And that is the beginning of who we are. And at a point along that way, developmentally, the heart feels secure enough to allow itself to project out a motor neuron that forms the brain. The brain sees the heart sees the brain. They mirror one another. The heart gives rise to the brain gives rise to the heart. It's a constant loop. But something comes along that's called culture. Push the magic. And the brain suddenly becomes a whole different thing in relation to the heart that has called it forth and summoned it and sent it out. Because the brain is programmed for the body's survival. Has nothing to do with the heart itself. It is looking around, it has eyes, it has content, it has ability, and it seeks power and order according to its way of knowing. It sees objects, it sees abstractions, and to use Buber's language, it is an eye that looks at its over and over and over again. It lives out of the past, because that's what the brain knows. And it knows how to survive, and it's going to survive or attempt to survive in any circumstance that it lives. It's logical, it's linear, and it's filled with memories. And we live out of this font of them all the time. They've been put there by culture, they've been put there by our parents, by our schools, by all this stuff. And it's all in there, and it's running our life, and we have no idea that it's so powerful. Let's try the next slide, please. The heart, out of which the brain comes, is the body's intelligence. No matter what anybody tells you, the heart is who we are. If we read the gospel out of the notion that the heart's intelligence is the knowledge of all that is, and that Jesus somehow represents that heart within the culture of the brain, Jesus begins to make a whole lot more sense. The heart shapes human wholeness. It enables the body to evolve. Brain doesn't like evolution. The brain wants things to stay the way the brain wants them. The heart is present always as an opening. It sees whole patterns, understands creation as a living, emerging process. The heart lives in a flow from the future, not from the past. The heart gives rise to the brain that does not consciously give rise to the heart. Next one, please. Oh yeah, this is a little video. About a minute and a half. Shows about how the heart works.
Over the past 18 years, our research center has investigated heart-brain interactions, how the heart and the brain communicate with each other, and how that affects consciousness and our perceptions. One of the things we identified in our research was the state we now call coherence. And what we found was that when we're feeling positive emotions, like we're really appreciating the sunset, or really feeling love or compassion or care for someone, that the heart beats out a very different message. The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic magnetic field produced in the body. And what we've now found is that if we look at the spectrum analysis of the magnetic field radiated by the heart, that emotional information is actually encoded and modulating into those fields. So by learning to shift our emotions, that's changing the information we're encoding into the magnetic fields radiated by the heart, and that can impact those around us. We are fundamentally and deeply interconnected with each other and the planet itself, and what we do individually really does count and matters.
See that? Heart is a field of energy. There's something there that when we are in the presence of the heart, our own or the heart of the universe, we feel differently. The heart doesn't care about long-term plans. The heart doesn't care about management models. The heart only says you are alive, and you are alive in this moment. Now be in it and not out of it, and not in the other direction. The brain sees life as a constant struggle. So we are born, it would think, into a world of sin and death. Religion offers respite and salvation, we say. That is an argument for religion called soteriology. If we think of life only in terms of what the brain is offering us in terms of information, that's a very, very small amount of information. And it looks to us, if we are living out of our brain only, that we have to take control of everything. It demands of us always to be powerful, to be forceful, and to be in control of everything. But at the same time, we're aware that it inflicts itself and its darkness and its shadowiness on all of culture. And so, particularly now as we watch this whole charade that's going on in Washington, there's this kind of ongoing thing of everything getting bigger and better and jockeying for power, and somebody's going to get control and somebody's not. And so it's this whole thing of winning and losing. At the same time, we're in the presence of the heart. And the heart doesn't care who wins and loses. The heart is the heart. It's there in a whole different way. I don't know whether you grew up with mega churches, and I didn't. Everything gets bigger. Everything gets huger. So Costco gets bigger than BJ's, and then there's lower prices, and there's better prices, and there's invented prices, and it just goes on and on and on. And all of it is seductive, and the brain adores all that stuff. Because then it can go out and do all these things and get good prices for this, that, and the other thing. The heart sees all of life. There's no search. There's only the living moment that invites us to let go of the past. We are born to reveal the glory of God. That is an ontological argument. Ontological religious argument. Soteriology says we're born in sin and death. Who knows what's going to happen at the end of life? We're constantly being watched. We're constantly being judged. Ontology, the heart, says just keep going. Nothing is the way you think it is. Nothing is the way you think it is. It's just an ongoing, constant opening. That opening is, ta-ta, the imagination. The imagination is not a state. It is human existence itself, says William Blake. But the imagination can also be something that the brain gets hold of. And instead of focusing the imaginal field on ourselves and the presence of the heart, imagination takes hold of us, and that's what we get into when we're bigger and better stores. The imaginal realm that I've been talking about is an emerging field. You've probably never heard of it. I hadn't until a couple of years ago. It's a realm within consciousness itself. Attention is drawn to the heart, not as a physical organ, but as an organ of perception. The heart knows. Experiences are there from another realm or other realms. We are surprised by them. We are moved by prayer, meditation, our real presence in the universe. A force stirs within us that needs no interpretation. It moistens the soul and gives it life depth. This is what we're missing. We're missing this capacity. We're ignoring where the real strength of our life is. For a long time, I started to try to figure out what's the difference between belief and faith. And I went back and I looked enuma in Hebrew, and then I looked at pistou in Greek, and then I fooled around with the word, and nobody really nailed it for me. Until I sat with the word itself and put it into the imaginal realm. And I realized that what Jesus offered people when he mirrored their faith was not a strengthening of their religion, but a strengthening of their body within themselves. They awoke to the dimension that they didn't know they were or that they had. Faith is that which we possess all the time in our bodies. But it has nothing to do with belief. Nothing. Belief is a list of stuff. We make it up. The faith is the substance of things unseen. And on and on and on it goes in Scripture. It's there. And that's what Jesus was able to show. Why? Not because he taught about it, but because he lived it. That's transmission. That's what we lack. We're not transmitting that which is the center of the gospel itself. The brain is a complex organ filled with ancient desires. It constantly searches for ways to exert power on behalf of the body. And the hardest thing that it has to do is to say, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. It's fun when you worked in a place like Colonial Williamsburg for so many years, and some little kid is walking along and says, Daddy, what is that? Dad hasn't got a clue. But he makes something up. Why? Because he wants to exert his power. He has to show, the little Hortense that he's so smart that he looks at the governor's palace and makes up something. He doesn't know what it is. Think of all the times we've done it. All the things that we said we'd never do to our children, that we did. I'll never do that. We do. The things that we come out of the past. It's all we know. But entry into the brain, or entry into the heart is not easy, and I want to conclude with this, and I'm already. Ethics, I love this quote from Judith Butler. She's a philosopher in California. Ethics requires that we risk ourselves. Watch this very carefully. We risk ourselves there at the moments of our unknowingness. Take that in. The moment of our unknowingness. When what conditions us, brain, and lies before us, the future, diverge from one another. When our willingness to become undone, to admit the fact that we don't know what's going on, constitutes our chance of becoming human, of becoming whose necessity knows no end. Jesus offers us the chance of becoming human. That's the story of the Bible. Over and over again, we meet the conditions that humans face, they reflect on it, and they're pulled to points of astonishment. Any of us who have studied Hebrew realize that the language is so incredibly original. There isn't much there, evidentially. But the presence of Hebrew is the presence of this series of astonishing acts that went on in the salvation, in the history of salvation. Over and over again, humanity grows through its astonishment. But first, it has to say, I don't know what's going on. And right now, I don't either. Dr. Pickleton. Wait a minute. Norma's got a question. Norma has lots of questions. All right.
I guess we want to know first, what is your definition of science?
Your definition of science?
Oh, Norma. Can we talk about it tomorrow? No, it's science is one of the ways in which the brain attempts to, science originates as a manner of observing life and recording it. And that's what I understand science to be. And anything above and beyond that, I'll get on Wikipedia and look it. All right, somebody else. It's getting late.
No, we're good. Other questions?
There is a way out of this, but I don't have time to talk about it.
Don't be afraid to ask David a question. Come on.
I'm just a theme park entertainer. Come on. I like to sell beer and pizza in a fest house, play an accordion, chat up women. It's easy.
One?
Yes. My favorite silver-tongued vixen from St. George's.
I want to invite you one more time to come bring your Calliope, November 7th.
Oh, you're telling all of my secrets out here.
Craft fair and church bazaar.
I exist on cheap thrills, folks. I don't belong here.
You were a hit and we want you back.
Well, Yeah, I also have a surface Calliope. You don't know.
Calliope, really?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any recommendations to learn more about Imaginal Realm?
Yeah, but that's for next year.
Oh,
Oh, stop! No, the opening to the imaginal realm is the opening to the body, and if we take ourselves seriously and look at all the negatives that are in the Bible and say, well, Paul, it was fun back in the first century, but we're going to have to push some of what you think aside because that's not how we live. It's just we have to begin to engage ourselves as whole beings. And that's practices of meditation, practices of mindfulness. I've been doing yoga for years and years and years. And I can't, anytime that I can feel myself wanting to go backward, I breathe a lot, and I stretch a lot. I mean, when was the last time you took a really deep breath? Just a big, deep breath. It doesn't happen very often. As we get older, we don't want to do all that nonsense. So we go to the gym, right? So we go to the Y and beat ourselves up, and we have been righteous because our brain has taken over, and the culture that forms the brain has taken over. And then we go in and we get hurt. You know the story. Then you've got all those sweaty towels hanging in the house. Now on and on and on. At no point in this tableau do we ever meet the body where it is. Yeah, we never meet it. We meditate it, we take it shopping, we have affairs, we drink too much, and we do all these things to escape the simple fact of the matter is that we don't know how to be in our own bodies so that the heart is able to be there and be compassionate because the heart understands what the body has been through. The heart understands the memories. And the memories we have aren't just ours. And if you really engage the imaginal realm, it will open you to places that you never imagined you'd be. Because there's so much information that's at a cellular level that is just waiting to be acknowledged. And we can't move out of where we are until we become a vessel so that we can be relieved of all of that past. The Jews know this. Teshuvah is an ancient doctrine that the Jews have, that the old ancient rabbis said, before creation, God was already present, flushing out all the stuff that didn't work. So there's this kind of ongoing digestive thing where at some point in life we have to just simply excrete all this stuff that's in our bodies, emotionally and otherwise. And that's Teshuvah. It's there. It's waiting. All we do, we just don't accept the gift. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Rose.
Which of the organ, the brain or the heart, who is the believer? Who is the one that has the faith?
All of it. The faithfulness is. Think back. You've been. Most of us have been around the block a few times. Think about we go back to a class reunion. Okay. You always look younger. I know I said that. And the rest of them look old. And then there's about half of them that are now underground. You're still alive. That means something if you're willing to accept the fact that you're still alive. There's something that is going on within your body besides all of those pills that is crying out to be acknowledged and to open itself to the larger world. If we don't do this, nobody's going to do it. For me, the church is the place where the heart must be opened, and I've got a lot of stuff to say about how you get to that. But we've complicated the whole thing. I think back about the early church and what Jesus was this mindful man who somehow and in some way brought mindfulness to a group of people. Mindfulness being the diversity that is life is the diversity that is life. And in order for me to participate fully in that, I have to somehow embrace it and at the same time be embraced by it. The only place that can embrace the diversity is right here, because in the heart, there isn't any separation. There's no argument here. The Hebrew word for heart has two consonants next to each other. It's as though there's two aspects of the heart that can manage the ambiguity of the life that we lead. But we have to open and acknowledge the fact that we can't, our brain can't live that way. It has to be taken somewhere deep into the body. And so, heart meditation is a wonderful thing to do. Anybody can do it. You just, I was out playing hooky this morning at TJ Maxx looking for a computer or something or other. But anyway, within earshot, of course, there's always the junky music that's playing, right? So think distraction, people. There's distraction all the time. Next to me is a man who has headphones on. The other side is another man who has headphones on. And they're both turned up so that the person listening to the headphones doesn't have to listen to this guy who doesn't want to listen to the music. What's wrong with this picture? It's nothing. And just keep increasing the volume and then more complexity. The only way that the brain can deal with what is going on is to make the situation, for some reason, more complex. In making it more complex, you've got all these other things that are going on that are negative. They just don't make sense. You've got all these unintended consequences. And that's another 20-minute talk. Think about what we're doing to the ecology. The brain doesn't have any connection to that. It cannot. All it can do is survive. It can survive. It doesn't care about polar bears and gas companies drilling. It doesn't care because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. The heart matters. So we can continue to build churches that are all brain-centered, get bigger and better, more loud music or whatever. But somewhere we've got to let go of the notion that sin, death, judgment, and hot rocks in eternity are the end of all this, and realize that if we don't get into the heart, we're not going to evolve. The heart opens if we allow it and if we let it love us. All right, am I done? Yes.
Thank you.
Goodbye.